All right, everyone, we're about to begin. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right. So welcome to another sense-making wormhole brought to you by the Intellectual Explorers Club. I'm your host, Peter Limberg. And these sense-making wormholes, I invited past podcast guests of mine to engage in group conversations with their design. Going to mute a few people. And I view these experiments in collective intelligence, and the people who are facilitating it, the past guests of my podcast, they can design it however they want, really. And today's session is facilitated by my dear friend, Andrew Taggart. Andrew is a practical philosopher, a philosophical consultant, and my personal favorite, a critic of total work. So I'm just going to tag Andrew in right now, and he's going to lead us for the rest of the evening. So yeah, that being said, Andrew, off to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And hi, everyone. Hi. So let's begin by finding our phones wherever they are and turning them on to mute or vibrate or airplane mode. Okay, so in this opening bit, I would just like for us to introduce ourselves in the following manner. First, just give us your first name, not last name. And second, whichever question you're alive to. I'll begin and then I'll tag Peter. We'll go around so that everyone's had a chance to speak, and then we'll move on to a guided meditation. So my name is Andrew. The question I'm alive to is, what is possible to glean from this particular kind of genre that I'm presently calling a we-space meditative discourse? So, Peter, you're up.
My name is Peter. The question I'm alive to is, what state of being should I be in right now to make the most of this experience? And I'll tag Hannah.
Hello, my name is Hannah, and the question I'm alive to is, what is this? And I will have to step out early, unfortunately. It's a busy evening for me, but wanted to come check it out and find out, what is this? I will tag Reed.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Reed Nice Wonder. Question I'm alive to is, what does it mean to be alive to something? I guess I want more clarification on that. But yeah, thanks. I tag Khalil.
Hi, my name is Khalil. Pronounce it perfectly. Question I'm alive to is, why do deep existential truths have a kind of feeling of being remembered? That's something I've always wondered. I'll tag Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy. It might be a little loud behind me. I'm in a coffee shop, but my question, I guess, is how can we be compassionate to everyone without knowing their deep psychology? Oh, and I'll tag Did you get that? I'll tag Tara.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Tara. My question would be, I agree with Reed. I'm curious to know more about what it means to be alive to something as well. I'm going to tag, sorry, it's hard. I'm on my phone, so it's kind of hard to see all the people. I will tag Ivan.
Hi, my name is Ivan or Ivan, and my question that is alive is what Andrew means by psychotechnologies of self-transformation. I'm just very curious about that term. And I'm going to tag Tristan. Tristan's iPhone is the name that I see.
Hi, sorry, I'm still working at my audio. What was? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is, what is that to which you're alive this evening?
To which I'm alive this evening?
Which question are you alive to this evening?
I haven't actually. I only just joined, so I haven't gone through each of the things just yet. But I think from what you were saying just before that, that is something I'm quite interested in as well. Particularly around the psychotechnologies and whatnot. I'm only pretty new to this space, so forgive me for my ignorance.
That's just fine. So find someone to tag next.
Okay, how do I? Just trying to look on the. It's my first time using this app, so. Maybe Amy?
I already went.
Oh, sorry. I've only just joined.
I'll jump in if you want to facilitate this a little bit. I'm sorry if you can't see. Yeah, no worries. My name is Jake, and the question I'm most alive to is, how do psychotechnologies relate to social systems? And I will tag Taylor.
Yeah, my name is Taylor. I think the question I'm most alive to is, what has everybody here? Everybody other than me. I'll tag Tim, Adeline.
I'm Tim. What's most alive to me is the question of how to understand how, with more fluidity, to open up and participate here together into this exploration. And I'll tag Narayan to come in.
Hey, it's Narayan here. What's feeling most alive to me right now is how do our modern set of psychotechnologies fit into the greater context of history? Where do they fit in terms of the psychotechnologies that have come before? How have they changed? And what is the potential for the various psychotechnologies as we move into the future? And I'm going to tag Noam.
Hi, I'm Noam. The question most alive to me is what's going to happen here? And I'll tag Jason.
Hi. I'm not sure if I'm
being heard.
We can hear you, Jason.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Jason, question most alive to me is compatibility between psychotechnologies. How do you tell if there's compatibility issues between different ways of interacting? That's the most alive to me at the moment. Thank you. And I don't know how to tag someone from here. I haven't got a screen or anything.
How about Khalil?
I already went, but I'll go again. So yeah, I'm Khalil, and I have a question about psychotechnologies. Is there a path dependence to how, when we use them, the kind of effects they have? And who's left? Yuli. I tag Yuli.
Hello, I'm Yuli, and the question I've become most alive to after listening to these other questions is, how is it that the different people participating in today's conversation are going to interpret the same content that we're all going to be hearing about and taking away differently, but which similarities are going to stick around? And I wonder if there's any consistency to the function that those similarities are going to play out when they start getting embedded into the institutions that each of us play a role in. Yeah, roughly that's what I'm thinking. And I'll tag Dev next.
Hi guys, my name's Dev, and the question that I am thinking about is how our philosophical relationship to time, or how our relationship to time can shift and change. So I'm looking forward to hearing what this conversation is about. Thank you. I'll tag whoever hasn't gone. I have no idea. I joined a little late, so feel free to jump in.
I don't think Nate has gone yet. Why don't you go next, Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate. I vibed a lot with Tim's question, so I wanted to chime in there. And I wanted to say that I think what I am alive to in this conversation is whether these psychotechnologies are giving us access to something real that we didn't have access to before, and how that works in a sort of performative or uncovering ontology. I'll tag whoever else hasn't gone after me.
Has anyone not gone yet? I think everyone's gone. Okay, so can everyone hear me? Thumbs up? Yeah, okay. And so two things. First of all, this is going to be an experiment, an experiential experiment. And therefore, some of the questions that are a little more theoretical nature may not be answered during the session. Therefore, if you have those sorts of questions, feel free to email me, and I'm sure that Peter will include my website and the show notes or somewhere else. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we're about to embark on a short guided meditation. And so the first thing to do would be to turn off your cameras. I'll leave mine on. Everyone else can turn off cameras. Beautiful. And also mute your microphone if you haven't done so yet. Okay, next, you might want to find a comfortable place. If you're in a seated position, that's fine. If you feel called to lie on the floor, provided that it's somewhat energetic, that would be fine too. You might want to take off your glasses, since that can be a bit of a hindrance if you're wearing glasses. In what follows, it would be lovely to see whether you're able to go along with the meditation. And if you can, that's wonderful. If, however, you find that you can't go along with the meditation, that is, if there's some kind of resistance within you, then perhaps your meditation could be beginning to examine the resistance. What is the resistance? Where is it? Does it have a shape or a size or a tone? And that can be a meditation during the guided meditation or during the next section, which is our group meditative discourse. Okay. Let's begin. You may want to keep your eyes open, or you can close them. Either is fine. You might find that there's a bit more energy if you have your eyes closed. Begin with your head. Imagine or visualize or sense or feel that you're installing energy all the way through your head, from the crown of the head all the way down to the jaw. All of that will be nothing but energy. Then begin to install energy in your neck so that your neck is just energy, entirely filled with and nothing but energy. Do the same for your left arm. Imagine the entire left arm is nothing more than, nothing other than, nothing less than energy, and therefore it is entirely filled up with energy from the shoulder joint all the way down to the tips of the fingers. And then do the same for your right hand. You can feel that your right arm, rather, is entirely filled with energy. Now turn to your trunk, the long trunk. Imagine or sense or visualize or feel that you're installing energy from your clavicle all the way down to the bottom of your trunk. That includes your heart, your solar plexus, your navel, your entire spine, the entire front of the trunk, and the entire back of the trunk. All this is energy. Then take your genitals and your butt and all that and see it as entirely energy. And now the right leg. Take the entire right leg all the way from the thigh down to the foot and install energy there, so that the right leg is nothing more than, nothing less than, and nothing other than energy. Nothing but pulsing, vibrating energy. And now do the same thing for your left leg. Allow energy to be installed throughout the course of your left leg, all the way to your foot, so that it is nothing more than, less than, or other than energy. And now imagine that there is some kind of brush going up and down your body, such that the brush is moving energy from the bottom of your feet to the top or crown of your head and back. When you inhale, the energy can be regarded as going up from the feet, through the middle of the body, all the way to the crown. Every inhalation, the energy flows, as it were, upward. Every exhalation allows the energy to flow downward. One beautiful brushstroke after the other. The whole body is brushed upward and downward. You breathe in, the brushstroke comes up. You breathe down, the brushstroke goes down. You might find your body just slightly rocking a little bit in concert with the inhalation and the exhalation. And throughout, you'll just feel the energy flowing upward and downward. And now sense that the energy is coming just out of your body in the front and back into the body, so that it begins to seem as if the skin is permeable. The inhalation brings the energy just outside the body. The exhalation brings the body into the body. Brings the energy into the body. Exhalation, the energy goes out. Inhalation, energy comes in. It might also feel a little bit like a rocking experience, or like a brush stroke, back and forth, back and forth, in and out, and so on. And now imagine or feel or sense that the energy from within you is being carried farther and farther away from you. That is, that the energy is expanding into the space nearby and then is going farther than the space nearby to the farthest possible, conceivable, or imaginable space. And therefore, the energy is doing nothing but expanding beyond the bounds of the skin, as far as the mind can imagine or conceive of. It is nothing but expansion. Throughout this meditation, for many of us, there has been a witness or an observer or an awarer, the one that seems to be doing all this. Therefore, we can now install energy in the awarer or the observer or the witness, the one that's been, as it were, standing behind all of this. Therefore, install energy in the awarer, in you, so that you are nothing but energy. In fact, do not install energy in the aware, rather be the energy itself. Anytime something tries to stand back from the process of installation, see that you too cannot stand back from being installed with, suffused with, and therefore entirely filled up with energy. Therefore, energy is everywhere, and perhaps it could also be said nowhere in particular. Therefore, there is no inside or outside, no above or below, no forward or backward. Everything is energy. And in fact, there is no thing. Rather, all processes are energetic. Everything is vibrating. Everything, which is no thing in particular, because no substance in particular, is just vibrating, pulsating energy. And now ask yourself a question. And allow that question to fill you all up with the sense of mystery. Do not try to answer the question intellectually. Just ask the question and see where it takes you. Ask yourself the question, who am I? Ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? Ask yourself, where am I? Am I here? Could I be there? Is there any sense to be made of here or there? Am I in space at all? Ask yourself the question, when am I? Am I before? Could I be after? Can I make any sense of talk of before or after? Or am I only, ever, always, now? Ask yourself, what am I? What am I? But even that is too much because it assumes that there's a what different from, and separate from I. So ask yourself, am I I? Am I I? But even that is saying too much. Therefore, ask yourself simply, mysteriously, I. 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 But even that is just too much. Therefore, sink and rest. Sink and rest in the nameless. And now, if you have your eyes closed, slowly open your eyes. But while you do so, don't even try to allow yourself to maintain this placeless place that we came to. That is, maintain this placeless place even when your eyes are open, even when your senses are open and available to the external world. And when you have yourself in a comfortable position and take your time, you can put your glasses back on if you've taken them off. And you can slowly turn your video cameras back on. Okay, I think most of us have our cameras back on. And so let's come to the we space meditative discourse, or the we space discursive meditation, or part 2. And here, let me just suggest that the place we found, if I may give a name to it for the moment, could be called the heart. I'm just using that provisionally. If you're not inclined to that term, then you can just let it go. The point of the second part then is to be able to speak from this place if you feel stirred to speak. If you feel no stirring to speak, then you can just keep sinking into this particular placeless place, this kind of silence, the silence before speech. And if you feel that anything is bothering you, or there's any kind of resistance, then take that as your point of departure. Just ask yourself, what is it that is that which I'm resisting? And you can go into that. And if you find that the resistance dissolves, then you can come back to the conversation we're having together. This is not meant to be a question and answer session. So I don't see myself any longer as playing the role of the one who's speaking throughout the course of this part, nor do I see myself as the expert answering questions. I'm simply interested in seeing what emerges in and through this particular genre. Okay. So I'm going to mute myself. And if anyone feels some kind of stirring to speak, please do so.
What I'm struck by is the resonance that you generated and communicated in taking us through that. You know, I'm very grateful for that experience. I think in a deep way, it's an appropriate and beautiful way to open this portal. What it brought to mind, what calls to be presenced most now, is how that kind of state is at once a settling. There's also this latent sort of potentiality that's right there and could be just expanded, you know, and breathed out at any moment. I think the quietness before speech seems to be a really beautiful dynamic there. Yeah, it's the lessening and then out again. So yeah, I appreciate that dynamic here. And I'm very interested in where this is opening into.
When Tim was talking, I just felt a warmth. It's like I just enjoyed your energy, Tim, and I'm sending you appreciation and love. And what came to mind when you were talking is that there's a sense when I was doing that meditation where I just felt transparent and visible, see-through, but at the same time completely here, like more here than I normally am.
I felt this strong sense when you asked, where are you and who are you, that they were almost the same thing. In that, I kind of found that there was this energy that we kind of only are energy, and that sort of interacts with the world. And in a weird way, if you sort of close your eyes and imagine where the energy is, that's also who you are. It's a bit hard to explain, but I got a strong sense of that.
There were a couple of moments that really struck me. I can only remember a few of them. One of them was when you asked, can I be anywhere other than now? It's kind of trivial when you think about it, but it really hit me at the right time. And I'm wondering what the experience is like for you, kind of pulling people to the edge of their definition of themselves. What is that experience like? Is it, I know you caution us against, not really caution us against, but you kind of remind us that there will be resistances, and I think that's helpful. But I'm wondering what it's like for you to be the one who's pulling.
I just close my eyes and let things happen. That's it, man. I'm just feeling what's happening, and I think it's and I guess I'm just seeing whether people are willing to go along and set aside a certain way of understanding according to the logos, according to our ordinary rationality, and whether they will melt into what's happening. And so it's entirely in the vein, I hope, of an invitation.
I think this notion of invitation is really interesting. Something you did which enabled a really beautiful continuity was in beginning the guidance. You said that if there is something you're not, so these aren't the words you use, but if there was sort of a snag you hit, right? If you weren't able to attend precisely to what was being invited, to pay attention to that resistance. And so what I'm interested in is both how to extend the hand, how to invite, to do so in a way that still enables absolute elegance in the if someone's not accepting. You know, it's like an offer. It's okay not to accept. Off we go. It's like to still be in touch with as like the full scope of possible resonance, even when that is not a direct kind of, yes, let's go together right now. I think that dynamic, the dynamic to do with invitation and acceptance and the landscape which enables the not accepting of an invitation to ultimately support both the accepting and the not accepting.
I want to say that for me, I'm finding it a whole ton easier to not have my mind running wild in the silence between people's words. I think I'm really, really resonating strongly with Tim's original message, his first comment about the beauty of the dynamic between the silence and the words. And I'm hearing the silence and I'm noticing my comfort and appreciation for it. And it's allowing me a different kind of attendance to what people are saying. And I'm noticing that in myself and appreciating it and really loving my participation in the conversation and just hearing the things and the silence together. It's bringing me a lot of joy.
I'm kind of appreciating that this is usually something that I sort of do by myself or in person with people, but to have this level of connection without being in the same place, I think is very special. It's very new to me. Yeah, and I'm very grateful to be involved in something like this.
Something came up when Tim was talking about the invitation and how I hold that is that when you're throwing out that invitation, there's sort of, or at least when I'm doing it right, or it feels like I'm doing it right, there's a sense of a radical availability to the other person. And I think I'm creating a greater sensitivity to who can accept that invitation and welcome my availability. And then I also have a sensitivity who can't. So there's a sort of like a spectrum. And the ones who can't, there's a sense of like almost hurt or annoyance or subtle anger. But I like what Tim was saying is that, or how I read that, it's like that itself is sort of an art form to maintain that invitation, to have that availability available, that state available, I should say, when the other person can't receive it or is not ready to receive it.
What it brings to mind, Peter, and I like how you put that. What it brings to mind is maybe we can take a relationship with a relative. I can consider certain experiences in my life, the people that I have a loving relationship with that's pained, of a sense in which there's something that let's say they're rejecting about me and it hurts. And there's a sense of holding the boundary of that, as in this rejection is real. There's something here that is not being seen and accepted. And that is part of this relationship. That is a dynamic that is painful to both of us. Yet at the same time, through that, looking into the eyes, there's something behind it. There's a deeper love. It's not connected somehow. There's some egoic block, or however we might want to however we might want to put that. There's something compromised in the map. It's like, no, I'm holding on to my map of this, you know, and there's pain there, but then there's a deeper sense of actually, in the end, really, we're still in this together. And so to hold to that and to presence that as that state of no-thingness in the here and now of this ripe potentiality, that somehow we are still involved in, and there's a deep sense of caring somehow in that's beyond what might be pained, even at a deep level, but still nevertheless not the whole picture, just deep maps and incongruencies, but that looking into the eye, there's that love there, far back into the eye, and there's a trust that over time, as we move on, as that particular invitation hasn't been accepted, that actually we are still in some sense connected. Yeah.
Tim, I resonated a lot with what you just said. It feels to me like when forms appear out of emptiness, there's places where different forms will be connected to each other and places they won't. And it sounds so simple when I put it that way. But of course, if we're the forms and we're emotional beings and we have these momentous experiences and momentous desires really that we didn't even expect, and they get denied to us in ways we didn't expect and can't comprehend and don't have the tools to comprehend, it can send us in places that we need to explore in order to learn more. The way you put it there, I feel like I would not to get away from this here and now too much, but I feel like there's elements there that I would love to see out there sometimes when people are feeling these kinds of pains.
Could you expand on that a little bit more? What kinds of pains and what would you like to see?
This is just one expression of it perhaps, but when there's groups and they feel a unity, and there's just a place that people want to go, and others don't. There's a definite rejection of at least aspects of it, aspects that feel essential or even sacred, or without those words necessarily when it's felt, of course. And how much that can cause a lot of pain, and people can respond without really understanding the experience, and that can lead to many unfortunate things. And so maybe that helps.
I feel like that I am resonating with what both what Tim and Noam said, but I'm also kind of thinking about it in terms of the self. As far as when I was going through this process, I found that certain aspects of my somatic form just didn't want to do it, like my jaw, my mouth, and my shoulders were like, I don't want to be a part of this right now. Different aspects of my consciousness and psyche were also like, oh, I don't want to do this right now. I'm thinking of things earlier in the day, like there were these blocks that were coming up for me for sure. And it is kind of like the blocks that we have with other people in connection are also kind of blocks that we have within ourselves that are realized through or come up somatically or in just different resistant thoughts and different resistant, I don't know, that's kind of what this is, with the idea of the resistance of the other, it's also the resistance of the other within.
I thought that was really beautiful.
perhaps putting these perspectives together, what comes to mind is this, it's a clash of what is felt to be sacred within as it comes into contact with what is held as sacred without from an external source. They're both involved. And then the sacredness, something John Vervaeke talks about, distinction to the sacredness of the process where we might be with each other fundamentally in a reciprocally opening way, in a manner that can transform what has been held as sacred, to reimagine it, revivify it as a symbol, as an icon, as a relationship, or a kind of an understanding, an identity, a renewal of that sense. Yeah.
I just want to present something, just point something out. When Amy was talking about her shoulders kind of tensing up and resisting, I could relate to that a lot. I could almost feel my spine kind of shaking a bit before I try to say something. And then I noticed Tim, how eloquently he uses his kind of embodied language. And it seems so like fluent, and it obviously seems to help you, if I'm right, Tim. And wondering if the relationship with your body has afforded you presence for other people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It is something I'm conscious of. In many different settings, I actually like to go out to different places in the city or in nature, but often cultural kind of places. And I like to dance with my headphones. And it's interesting because, you know, anyone could go out there and move around, but if you move in a way that is somehow pained or discordant, it's going to be very unsettling. And it's been interesting to watch when people feel relaxed around me in a space. And often when I'm moving, it feels very similar to thinking. And so it seems to be quite remarkable that how we hold ourselves is enabling of safety, and again, an invitation to participate and ultimately be with and transform the not knowing in a certain state of vulnerability that's nevertheless connected somehow with, you know, some sort of elegance and a desire ultimately to be helpful, you know, to offer something to the space. And, you know, you see, and we could go out to a club or a bar or something, someone comes along and brings some real life with their movement. It just lifts everything, you know, someone just comes in and people are willing for that to happen. And there's a way people can open the space like that. And it's, there seems to be a deep continuity there in what we pick up on. And so I find that experientially, the state is quite similar. Yeah.
I was just wondering if anyone has experienced where your heart or your mind wants to connect, but you feel physical resistance. Like for example, during that meditation, and actually just during life in general, I find that my heart always yearns to be closer to people and to, you know, feel more connected, but physically I feel stuck. And I'm not sure if that's something that comes from, you know, deep inside or maybe past trauma. But yeah, I was just wondering what, you know, whether other people have experienced that sort of push and pull of like, you want to be close and connected, but, you know, something's holding you back.
Yeah, I feel that quite a lot, Tara. It's really a strange experience because on one hand, you actually know deep down that you really care about the person or the people or whatever it is. I personally get this thing where even though I feel that, I'm still incapable of articulating things that I know the other person needs to hear and that I probably should say for the relationship as a whole. But there's like, as you say, that there's like this weird physical like wall that kind of filters things through. And I've also thought that I'm kind of like the only person who feels like that. So it's nice to know that somebody else shares that same kind of thing. I thought I was going crazy.
I'm curious to know, you know, how maybe other people have addressed that, or, I mean, it's kind of comes down to, you know, letting your wall down or your protection. Yeah, any thoughts on how other people have been able to do that?
I can only speak from personal experience, and I'm by no means an expert in that. But I would say, like any of these things that come up for us, I think the first step is being aware of it when it happens. And once you sort of captured that awareness, I sort of delve into, if possible, like if you're not in a situation where you can't, delve into it in a sort of meditative practice, and almost ask the question, well, where is this coming from? I find that sometimes can help sort of identify the cause of what might be, where it's originating from. I don't always get an answer to that question, but I think it's a useful sort of pathway to take in those moments. Because as you sort of said, you kind of know what you need to do, but for some reason you can't. And I think it's useful to sort of delve into why that we can't.
I'd like to get in on that question. I think I could not relate more directly to the question of, do you feel physical resistance in your body? And I think that the first, I would connect this back to another question from the meditation where we were being asked to consider what we are, and the meditation really wisely asks you to notice that what you are is not separate from what you're experiencing. And I would connect that to this question by saying that when I feel that resistance, I often I want to locate that resistance external to myself. I want to make it about whether or not the other person is right, or, and you know, like in whatever sense of right, like, are they logically correct? Are they factually correct? Are they whatever, right? To make it some kind of intellectual game. I feel this way because someone else is wrong in some way. Or maybe it's connected to some trauma that I have. It's bringing up, you know, something from my own past, something from my own relationships, or whatever that is. and I don't notice that that feeling comes from within me, I feel like it must be something about the universe or the other person that's causing this in me. But when I stop to meditate, like what is this feeling that I'm having, I notice that it's not external to me, that it's inside of me.
I want to add that I have a similar experience quite often of recognizing that it's internal to me. I've developed a little bit of a pragmatic habit for dealing with situations like that. I sort of used a mnemonic to remind myself of a state of clarity, and I use it when I don't have the time to actually dive into my emotions. But there's something interesting that I want to mention about that. The mnemonic is just a really quick motion where I tap the center of my forehead, and it just sort of clears my mental space. And I immediately feel lighter. I immediately feel easier. And it just allows me to be more present in the moment, because it basically like hard wipes whatever was on my mind that was taking up so much space, and then, you know, cluttering up the fluidity of my present, like cluttering me up. But I think it's one really interesting thing about these experiences is that I notice that I don't always use it. And I think that I use it far more often in situations where I notice that there's something important to the other person in a conversation. And that I notice when I attend to the fact that there's more to the other person, and I notice that this is a personal relationship and we have a dynamic that we're developing and there's something important to them, then I'm reminded that I can wipe away whatever is stopping me from being able to engage meaningfully with the other person. But it's odd that I don't do this so often when I don't attend, when I don't notice that there's something important to the other person. And I think that's interesting. I think it sort of speaks to that idea that this has to be something that's internal to me, that's clunking up the conversation, the ability to engage with the other person meaningfully. But it also speaks to the idea that the awareness that Tristan mentioned, that the awareness of this comes first. There's something that needs to be there, some awareness, in order for us to be able to meaningfully pull out a behavior like that and meaningfully try to reframe and engage, choose to engage more deeply, more presently.
I'm curious if you, in those moments, have ever actually got to a point where you were aware of it, but that you still felt that there was this block and you still decided to not say or do the thing, even though you're very salient of what it was that needed to be done.
That's a good question. I think I
say that because I've experienced that quite a lot.
The idea of becoming aware of a block, but not being able to move it. I think there's a caveat I should add, that I probably have only done this in situations where I was aware somehow, somewhere, some part of me was aware what needed to be done. Whether that was just holding space and being curious, which it often is. So I felt like because I've had more awareness of what should be done once I've chosen to engage that way, I don't have a lot of moments like that. But I have had plenty of moments where, for whatever reason, I haven't sort of reconnected with that part of myself that's there and can listen and can be there. And I've often had that where I notice there's a problem, but I don't pull out the mnemonic. And then the problem just kind of sticks around. And then my rational mind gets really, really all up in it and says, I'm just going to solve this problem pragmatically. here's the function that will speed up our conversation and get us to the point where we want to be. Less comfortable. I always feel uncomfortable when that happens. I don't feel happy about myself about that either. Yeah.
I have a question. A friend pointed out to me that I would always look at my hand, right? And then I realized I was doing the same thing that you said you did when you tapped your head. It's almost like I was reminding myself that I can take a third person view of what I'm doing. And I was doing it unconsciously. So I'm wondering if, but then when I realized that I was doing it, when did you realize that this was a thing? And afterward, did that change your use of it? Or like, did you ever do it unconsciously and not realize it for a time and then realized it and then used it differently?
So Callie, before I answer, I want to say that I heard a lot of really loud audio from your side, and I'm not sure if there's something that you can tweak about that, but there were some really loud sounds that came from your side. If there's something you can do about them. But to answer your question, no. There were other things that I've done subconsciously, sort of without being aware of it, but this particular thing, it came from the idea fundamentally that we can grow as people and we can become better human beings. And that I've had a few experiences that were really motivating and eye-opening that said I could do better and I can have better relationships and I can live a more meaningful present life. And then I developed this and I said, okay, well, how am I going to do this? I need a mnemonic. And then I trained it and I sat at home and I went, okay, this is the mindset. These are the feelings. These are the emotions. This is the awareness. It must connect here. And I just repeated that a couple of times and felt it and visualized it. And then I practiced it in easier settings. I practiced it where I thought it wasn't so hard to activate that part of myself, where I was already sort of vaguely aware that, yeah, I could pull that mode of me in. And then once I practiced it, it became easier. And then I started being able to do it in other situations. For me, yeah, I didn't have that.
That's pretty cool. I think one of the other things I'm just realizing after you just said that, Yuli, was there are like different intensities of it as well. And I found that now that I'm looking back on it, it sort of depends on the environment and the activity that I was in. That some things actually generate that kind of response. And for me personally, it's whenever I'm working on computers and in technology, or doing anything where I'm super conscious and using the prefrontal cortex, I suppose, a lot in regards to solving some kind of intellectual problem. I'm less likely to engage on that emotional side of things. It's almost like those walls come up, and the more I go into that sort of conscious analytical side of things, the thicker that wall gets, which is kind of a problem because I work as a programmer, so I'm in that space a lot, and it's actually caused a lot of problems for myself and my wife. And yeah, it's just kind of interesting to recognize when these things happen and what is it that there are actually certain activities. And I think what's interesting is that by being aware of what actually triggers it in the first place, it might actually help you to go into that activity with that awareness that, hey, if somebody does come and interact with me, I need to be super cognizant of and super salient of that this is a problem usually when I partake in this kind of thing.
So the question, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask a question too. I was reminded of Tara's original question while Tristan was speaking. And I became curious to know if the awareness of that wall looks different for different people. Like maybe I can imagine it would take different form in our bodies, but I wonder if there are other things, like maybe, certainly for me, it's not always physical. I might feel it physically because of tension, but I sort of almost like for me, that tension feels like it's self-created, and the real wall is mental. It's abstract. It's a set of thoughts that are taking up mental space. And I wonder if there are different types of feelings people have felt when they feel something like that wall. Because I don't know if, yeah, I would imagine that the experiences are different, and probably the solutions have to be different. And I'm super curious to see what other people's awareness of this kind of sensation has been like.
What's coming up for me, and this is sort of a device that I'm developing and I return to, and Tara comes to mind because I know she's plugged into the Stoic community, and this is sort of like a Stoic algorithm that I run anytime my serenity gets disrupted or disturbed. And it's sort of like this default frame that every single emotion or felt sense that I experience is sort of like a friend giving me advice. And sometimes that friend is not always giving me the best advice, right? Sometimes friends don't always give the best advice, but they mean well. And so when I feel an emotion that's intense, that throws me out of the moment or the here and now, I say, thank you. I said, like, thank you, friend, for giving me this advice right now. And that sort of just, that alone just sort of kind of like calms it down a bit. And then maybe I can return to it and sort of do some inner work on it. But by doing this, you kind of like, I get a sensitivity to the ecology of felt senses that are operating in my body, and having a relationship with each one of them, and then building a sensitivity when they get triggered, when they return, and just building a relationship with that friend, that device, that emotion, that felt sense. And I think by doing that in my own body, my own awareness, I feel it in other people more when those felt senses become activated in them. And I think it's helping me become a more of an intuitive person. So just the right thing to say at the right time becomes more clear when I'm with someone who is also in a state where their serenity is disrupted.
Sounds to me like, Peter, you there, it's a movement of creating and re-establishing a we space rather than an us them of somehow some trigger point being challenged. Some opens it back up again to really being with and ultimately collaborating. It's nice.
Yeah, I like that. Sort of it's like finding your way back to communitas. And one thing, like just an example, like right now, when I noticed when people were asking questions, like direct questions, annoyance was coming up in my body. Right? I'm like, no, don't ask questions. Because I have like a story that, like, if we want a midwife, a communitas, asking question creates a different energy. It's like more analytical, more in your head, and it's less from your heart. I don't know if this is necessarily the case, but this is the story. And so when I was feeling this annoyance come up in my body, I just said, thank you. And then sort of just went away a bit.
One thing that I've been learning about myself is that all this talk of walls and blocks and resistances, I think I used to understand in terms of not being whole or not being perfect somehow. And therefore it was very easy I think, to get involved in some form of spiritual bypass, as it's called, or just to sweep them away. And then I think the inclination is to believe that walls or resistances or whatever are problems, and therefore as problems they need to be gotten rid of. And that took me a little while to see that that may not be the correct understanding of what they are. Instead, the philosophical side of me is just learning to extend the inquiry in a different way. So if philosophy is the loving pursuit of truth, then I'm wondering about how any kind of resistance I have is actually, now I'm speaking in mystical terms, but is a pointer. It's a pointer to what someone called the nameless absolute. The Upanishad suggests that every form and name is actually a pointer or a longing for the absolute. So another way of putting all this is that when I sense some kind of resistance I have, whatever it is, I can say thank you, as Peter did, and then I can see where it's carrying me. What kind of truth, in a pretty broad sense, is trying to disclose. As a consequence, I'm not thinking that this is a problem anymore. It's what Buddhists call a dharma door, or a gateless gate. And that has made it's partly conceptual, but it's also partly meditative or contemplative. And it's really shifted my willingness to really love the truth as it arises in my ordinary experience, and to see what is behind or beneath or above what's presenting itself to me. That's my mystical leaning.
I actually really resonated with one point that you made about sort of feeling like the resistance maybe came from like something you didn't feel like you were perfect or maybe not good enough. I was kind of pondering on the idea that I feel like for me especially, my resistance I think comes from a place of feeling different than other people. And I think generally a lot of people that are more intellectual or deep thinkers are often do feel different, and maybe feel like a bit not left out, but just kind of like, I don't know if you guys are like me, but sometimes you feel like you're kind of on the outside looking in, you know? Yeah, and like I also have like a physical disability, so I feel like in that sense I've always felt a bit different than people, and I think sometimes my resistance comes from just not feeling like I'm similar to other people, you know? Anyways, I just thought I'd throw that out there for discussion.
I think that when you have these kind of feelings of being different, it's easy to kind of hide within the intellectual and kind of make that the safe space for yourself versus, or at least that's what I do. I can say that as a general thing. And it's been very, Peter, I was thinking about this idea of loving the wall versus hating it or wanting it to change or needing it to be different, and sort of seeing what happens when you actually like those things that you do to create or maintain resistance versus trying to like knock them down before they're ready to come down.
I think perhaps I can synthesize a little bit and speak to both of these points, particularly yours, Tara. Can definitely feel like the case when there is much on your mind to express, or that the particular wall you're experiencing is the kind of wall that, if you were to express it, would all of a sudden be quite substantial for the people around you to deal with, right? You'd be putting yourself in the fore in a way that might be like, it's almost could be rocking the boat or taking too much time in the space, but nevertheless, for you to sort of authentically presence that, it feels like such a big thing. So it's like these blocks that we experience, especially in relationships, just how deep do they go? Just what may be unsettled? And that is, well, it's a deep challenge. There's something about presencing that is going to require of the container that it can hold that presencing, right? That there's an adaptability there. It requires a sort of cooperation, and necessarily as well, it sort of requires you to just extend beyond your boundary in a way that's putting yourself in the limelight, so to speak, in a way that, well, it might not work out in the short term. It might fall flat in a way, part of a process, and I think stronger for it. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge. There's more to say there, but I think I feel that.
I take a risk and try to say something from public transportation, but I wanted to jump in on the idea that we experience these things in our mind and not in our bodies, which is a useful way to think about that sometimes, but also it can be useful to switch over to the idea that there's, to the framework that there's no distinction between mind and body, that maybe there's a spectrum of places that you feel things, and some things are more mental than others, but to draw a line between I'm feeling this block in my mind but not in my body, sometimes dissolving that mind-body connection can help you to place the block more clearly and be able to deal with it a little bit more directly.
Yeah, that almost reminds me of kind of the Vipassana, for those who are familiar with that kind of mentality, which is, everything is kind of reflected somehow in our bodies. And they kind of have this idea that by not sort of observing these things, it creates this sort of spiral that sort of spirals out of control because we're not aware of it. And that sort of is a reflection in our bodies. And then that sort of creates an unconscious reflection in our mind, which creates more of a sensation in the body, which then sort of creates that spiral. And one of the things about this sort of style of meditation, which is really interesting, is that just by simply observing it, not doing anything, not changing anything, just simply just observing it, you break that automatic spiral. And it's kind of this whole idea of recognizing whether it's mental or physical, this thing, would be it positive or negative, and just they sort of have this phrase, accept the reality as it is, not as you'd like it to be, but as it is, and remain equanimous. And I think that might be a potential way to look into these walls and to deepen the link between the mind and the body, which is so apparent.
I have some experience with both Vipassana and another type of meditation, both of which have helped with these kinds of things. But the other kind, the other an aspect of the other kind that may be pertinent, is to observe a thing and to see like an experiential thing, and see some space between a stimulus and a response, or between like various experiences, one that follow after another. Seeing that space it's almost like giving you the idea that the second thing need not follow from the first necessarily, although it's not that wordy, of course. Sometimes the terms spaciousness are invoked here. So.
I'm probably biased, and I think I'm biased in the point I'm about to make, and I think Tim, Taylor, and Andrew, and a few others here share this bias, is that the key to a lot of this is like being good at having conversations and dialogue and being in relationship. And there's this exercise that I like I journal every morning, and there's this exercise I do sometimes. I think it came from Jung, called active imagination, where you just sort of like map words. So you translate what your felt senses are saying into words. So if you feel fear, it might just say run away. If you feel anger, just as attack, or whatever it wants to communicate. And so like when I hear people saying the wall a few times, like what is the wall saying? If you translate that to propositions or English, what's it telling you? And I think maybe that the first step to being in good relationship with that felt sense, that real thing that's existing inside you, is to start having good conversations with it. And then once you start having good conversations with it, then maybe a good relationship can form with it.
I really appreciate what you just said there. Something just clicked for me. It's really cool.
Ditto.
It reminds me of what?
Yeah, I think that idea of like, if you were to describe the wall, what would it be? That's like a really interesting concept, because I think the more you sort of delve into it and the more you break it apart, the more you realize the wall isn't really kind of there. It's just these things we think are there. But yeah, that's a really cool exercise.
I really resonated with the advice to start communicating directly with all sorts of different things that could come up and trying to translate them. I've never thought of trying to translate them. I've always been, I guess, afraid that if I mistranslate them, I'll be building in sort of poor habits or poor responses. But I really appreciate this, because you're right. It's not, I have to start the conversation somewhere, and practicing that conversation in a comfortable space that's my own, like a journal, seems like a really good way of doing that. So I really appreciate that. It seems to work for how I've been thinking about this. And I'll try it and see how it goes.
I went to a therapist who started having me do that kind of work by trying to locate where in the body you feel the resistance. And you would often start roughly with like the gut, the heart, or the head. And there's a lot of different personality constructs that use those three centers. And not just personality constructs, but lots of ancient wisdom that uses those three centers as being locuses of different ways of being. And so that was really helpful as a tool for me to conjure where in my body I felt it, and then try to imagine a scenario that would pull that resistance back up for me, and try to feel how it begins, how it arises, how it goes away. All of that is very useful as something that can be noticed for me.
Maybe we should talk to the point that Taylor made as well, which I kind of like, which is what is the wall's purpose and how does or did it serve me? I'm just reading that out just so we can address that, I suppose.
Hi. So I just want to say something since we're talking about how to get rid of the wall or whatever to address it. What helps me and the meditation itself is helpful in that aspect is kind of to get out of your body and to look at this as some kind of a brain imperfection or something like that, and to realize, oh, I just have this brain or whatever you believe in, some kind of feelings that I might be feeling and maybe I don't want to feel them, but that's okay because everybody is imperfect. I am a part of this huge universe. I don't even know if the past or the future exists, and so on and so forth. Just to get out of your body and to kind of look at yourself from a third person perspective. That helps me. Now we can go on to the questions. I just wanted to say that.
How do you approach that, Ivan? How do you approach that idea of taking yourself out into the third person? Do you use like an exercise you run for yourself?
Well, this I've done this kind of meditation before, so that helps to kind of, I don't know, to think of yourself as I don't know. It goes in the direction of it doesn't really matter at this particular point in time. We're all imperfect. We're all gonna die. We're all just nobodies in this huge universe, and just realizing that kind of helps me. But when you actually do the meditation, you kind of feel it at the same time. If you so you kind of feel yourself at ease, and then I'm able to analyze it more. For me, the other thing that helps is to actually try to understand where it's coming from, where the wall is coming from. And when I do that, then I have a choice about how I want to proceed. And that kind of helps me as well.
Thank you very much, everyone. We have about 10 minutes or so remaining, give or take. And I'd like to take us through one final meditation together. And so it might be a good idea to turn off your cameras again, if you'd like to do that. And make sure you're on mute. And again, you can put yourself in a comfortable position. Perhaps you want to take your glasses off if you're wearing them. If you don't want to take part in the meditation, that's fine too. We can go back to the theme of today's conversation, which has been resistance, or specifically walls. And indeed, if there's at any point in the meditation when you feel some kind of resistance or block or a wall, you've listened to all the lovely things and important things that people have said today. So you might avail yourself of one of those approaches, or perhaps multiple approaches. Okay. You can have your eyes open or closed. It might be easier if you have your eyes closed, at least easier for many of us. And here we'll start with the feet. And I will invite you to install light in your feet. Therefore, your feet, your right foot first, your left foot next, is just light. You can imagine that, or you can visualize that, or you can sense that, or you can feel that. It's not important that there's some profound light in your feet, just that there's some intention directed toward the feet and the installation of light there. And then you can take your right leg and install light all the way up your right leg, through your calf, the knee, the thigh, with the result that your right leg is entirely light, emanating brilliant light. Likewise, you can install energy in your left leg, with the result that your left leg is just brilliant, emanating light. And now bring your attention to your genitals and your butt, and allow that area to be entirely filled up with light. And now come to the trunk. Slowly install energy all the way throughout your trunk, throughout the front, throughout the back, and between the front and the back, so that the entire middle of the body is luminous light. Come now to the left hand and the left arm. Install energy all the way through your left hand and all the way up your left arm, all the way up to the shoulder. And now you can imagine or visualize or sense or feel that the left arm is completely filled with light, is nothing other than, nothing separate from light. Likewise, you can install energy in your right arm, starting with the right hand, going up and through the right hand, up and through the forearm, up and through the upper arm, all the way to the right shoulder. Not only outside, but also within. One sees or feels or experiences light. And now come to the neck. You can install energy all the way around, all the way in, all the way through the neck, so that the neck is just vibrant with light. And now come to the head. You can install light all the way throughout the head, from the back, up the front, through the middle, to the crown, and perhaps even slightly above the crown, beyond the crown. As a result, the head is entirely filled with, permeated by, saturated with, and utterly alive with light. From the tips of the toes, from the heels, all the way up through and around the body, up to the head and up beyond the crown of the head, there is nothing but brilliant light. Consider the possibility that you yourself are only utterly, completely light. It is not that you feel the light, rather it is that you are the light. It is not that you see the light. Instead, you are the light. Consider the very possibility that the light, what you are, is also love. Plentiful, generative, generous, capacious, overflowing love. And now we can open our eyes. And as we're opening our eyes, let us live the possibility that this light is loving. And when you're ready, you can turn on the cameras, your cameras rather. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome, Peter.
Thank you, everyone. It was lovely to share this time with you. Look forward to seeing you all again. Nice meeting you, Andrew. Peter, good to see you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
See you guys.